Hi, my name is Rich Roberts. I'm a medical doctor, a doctor of biophysics, and the former CEO for 24 years of a pharmaceutical company. I'm going to give you information on treatments for the coronavirus that you simply are not going to get anywhere else because people may not have had the same areas of exposure in both medicine, science, but also pharmaceuticals and regulatory affairs that I've had. Lastly, because I'm an Orthodox Jew, I'm going to also address two videos and information that have been put out by two Orthodox Jewish physicians. First, I want to speak to you about hydroxychloroquine. This is one of the leading candidates in the press, not necessarily scientifically, but in the press, to treat coronavirus infections. And it's a very hot topic of conversation. Hydroxychloroquine is used to treat rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. It's a very common drug, although you can't find it on shelves anywhere now because the American public have basically cleaned the shelves off of this product. This is my second YouTube video on this subject, and if some parts of it don't necessarily fit with your particular levels of understanding or areas of understanding, then please bear with me because I will get back to areas that are common to everybody. I have a particular expertise in this area of drugs because hydroxychloroquine is called a 1-aminoquinoline, and it is a chemical modification of a drug called chloroquine, which is a chemical modification of a drug called quinine, and my company was the first one in the United States to get an FDA approval on it. What you need to know is these are very old drugs. Hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine were approved before 1982. After a drug has been approved, and then after a certain number of years it goes generic, there's no more money, no more financial incentive in selling that product anymore that will fund research and development on it. So the research and development on hydroxychloroquine has been very, very little since 1982. But its precursor, which is in the same chemical group as hydroxychloroquine, which is called quinine, that was one that our company, by an interesting twist of fate, got approval for not too long ago. I had to go back and check the records, but I think the year was around 2007, something like that. Certainly, we researched this drug up to modern standards, and we made some discoveries on it, which are critically important now to what you're seeing about hydroxychloroquine. Number one, why do we have information about quinine that we don't have about hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine? The reason is because quinine was being sold in the United States illegally for most of history up until our initial drug approval on it in, like I said, around 2007. The reason is because FDA has allowed a lot of old drugs that were never FDA approved and never fully researched to remain on the market because they were necessary, medically necessary. FDA started an initiative about 40 years ago to try to bring all of these old drugs up to modern standards. So FDA had something called the FDA's draft guidance on unapproved drugs, and it said that if a company will do research on one of these old drugs and bring it up to modern regulatory and scientific standards, then FDA will give a certain amount of exclusivity, a certain amount of time of exclusivity so that company can make profits on it. Now here's the critical thing you need to know. There are several studies now showing that hydroxychloroquine might, not does, might work to treat coronavirus. The most spoken about of those studies is from France, and they used hydroxychloroquine along with Z-Pak, where the generic name is azithromycin. Now, virtually everybody you're going to see on the internet, including medical doctors, will say that the reason why these probably work together is because the azithromycin works to stop pneumonia from bacteria, whereas the hydroxychloroquine works by allowing zinc to go into cells. I'm here to tell you that there's a very good chance that they're all wrong. What we found was that quinine, which again is chemically similar to hydroxychloroquine, the way it's broken down in the body, that's called metabolism. The way it's metabolized is with an enzyme in the liver called the cytochrome P450 system, and it's the specific enzyme is 3A4. Now that breaks down quinine, that also breaks down hydroxychloroquine. Interestingly, that also breaks down azithromycin. And we have warnings on our quinine label about taking azithromycin and quinine together because the blood levels can shoot up dramatically of quinine. Now, you can expect the same thing to happen for hydroxychloroquine. So we might say, oh, okay, so taking azithromycin along with hydroxychloroquine caused much higher blood levels of hydroxychloroquine than what doctors would have thought that the patients had, and that's what helped the hydroxychloroquine to let a lot of zinc into the cells to kill the virus. That may well be true, but there's a downside to that. Quinine causes, let me go back for a second, every time your heart beats to pump out blood, there's an electrical signal that goes over the heart, and that's what causes the muscles of the heart to contract. And if you know an electrocardiogram, it goes like boop, doo-doo-doot, boop, boop, doo-doo-doot, boop. That's electrocardiogram. Now, the distance between two of those beeps, two of those peaks, is called the QT interval. If that gets too long, too much duration between them, people can get a disruption of the electrical rhythm of the heart called torsades, T-O-R-S-A-D-E-S, and it can cause heart attack and death. So when people are running around saying, oh, there's a French study, azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine, take them together. Well, whoa, wait one second. That all sounds nice. We don't know for sure that it works, and we do know that it can cause unpredictably high levels of hydroxychloroquine, again, because the azithromycin interferes with your liver's ability to break down hydroxychloroquine, and this can lead to the QT interval, that's electrical activity, to be prolonged, and it can lead to heart attacks and death. So that's why this should not be done lightly, and this should not be done without being supervised or under the care of a licensed medical doctor. And everything I'm saying here, you should check with your licensed medical doctor. But if you tell your medical doctor the information I just told you, tell him or her to go look it up. They probably don't know this. They probably don't know about the azithromycin interference with hydroxychloroquine metabolism and blood levels, and tell them they should check Qualaquin, Qualaquin. That's the brand name of the drug that we had in the company that I used to be the CEO of. It was sold, and then I retired. They should check that out and understand that they need to make an assessment on whether they should be checking your electrocardiogram before and during treatment. Now, President Trump has said that FDA is fast-tracking a study on hydroxychloroquine to treat coronavirus. Now I'm going to tell you how the government really works. When it comes to agencies of the government, there's all kinds of different agencies that do all kinds of different things. The number one priority of agencies is to protect their own jobs. I'm sorry to say it. Now, I don't think this is true about the military. Military people are willing to risk their lives and limbs and be injured or potentially die protecting our freedom. But when it comes to these agencies, the number one priority of agencies in general, workers in those agencies, is to protect their jobs. So what you need to know is, in regulatory agencies in the government, there are two types of employees. One are called career employees, and the other are political appointees. Almost all the people that work in all of the agencies of the government are career employees. They work there, for example, at FDA, they work as a chemist, they work as a reviewer of applications, they work as an inspector, and they expect to work there for 20, 30, 40 years, and they'll retire from there. Presidents come and go, presidential administrations come and go, Republican, Democrat come and go. These people stay, and they are very, very careful that not to lose their jobs. That's their number one priority. Do they want to help the public? Yeah, sure, but they don't want to lose their jobs. And they know that they will not lose their jobs if they go by the regulations. And by the way, this goes all over government. For example, criminal enforcement agencies like the Department of Justice, they know when they open up an investigation, the investigators, the lawyers that open up an investigation in DOJ and spend $500,000, $1 million, $2, $3 million out of DOJ's budget, they know very well that if they don't get a conviction, and if they don't get fines or high-profile people in prison, they know that it's going to look bad on their records. So I'll give you an interesting story with our company and FDA, and Human Health, Department of Health and Human Services. After the World Trade Centers came down, there were anthrax attacks on the United States. And it turned out that the drug that worked to treat anthrax infections is doxycycline. And our company was one of the companies that made doxycycline, and we had plenty of it. So the government, a group called the Metropolitan Rapid Deployment Force, which was I don't know if it still is, an agency in the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, contacted us and said that they want to stockpile doxycycline so that if there's an attack, a major attack, and people didn't know, maybe somebody with an airplane with an insecticide spray was going to fly over a city and just spray it with anthrax. They wanted to have a certain number of millions or tens of millions of doses available so that the Rapid Deployment Force could rush doxycycline into that city like overnight and start to treat people. So at the time, we made on a bottle of 100 tablets, 100 capsules of doxycycline. This is a pharmaceutically manufactured, sophisticatedly manufactured product. We made like 20 cents per bottle of 100 capsules. It was ridiculously low. And we really could have charged anything that we wanted at that point because people were all around the country, like they did with hydroxychloroquine, were just wiping it off the shelves. But I said, you know what? We're not going to raise the price. And as a matter of fact, for the government wanted to buy it at a price even below that, where we didn't make any money at all. I mean, the 20 cents a bottle was pathetic, but we made no money at all. But I said, you know what? We're going to give half of our production to the Rapid Deployment Force. So we agreed to do it. Great, we did it. Now, two stories come off of this. The next thing we know, we get contacted by the Human Relations Department of the government. And they said now that we are a contractor for the government, they have to inspect our affirmative action plan. So I went ballistic. I said, just look at this. We don't want the government business. We have people clamoring, begging for it. All the major warehousing drug chains, the names you know, they were begging us for the product. We were pouring it out as quickly as we could. And I said, we'll give half of it to the government. Well, we will make no profit, even though we made a little profit on the other business. And now we're getting an inspection. It was by the Labor Department. So for our affirmative action policy. So I just went ballistic. Now, we had an affirmative action policy. We had an affirmative action policy. And the truth is, I felt good internally, and I prided myself on the fact that we were a meritorious company, merit-based company. If employees performed, they got promoted. And I was very happy that there were many minority employees from racial minorities that went up the ladder in management. And there were also a number of employees who had graduated from the local Catholic girls' high school, never had any college education, and they moved up into management. Why? Because they performed, because they were smart, they were capable, dedicated, hardworking, they were loyal, they were reliable. So I had a lawyer, one of our law firms, write a letter to the Labor Department and say, this is absolutely atrocious, this is absolutely ridiculous, that they want to inspect us now. Nevertheless, they the Labor Department contacted our attorney and said, look, we have no choice. The computer spit out your name because you're a government contractor now. We understand the situation. Just have your affirmative action policy on the table. We'll come in, we'll look at it, we'll go. And to the Labor Department's credit, and this is rare that you see government do this, the inspector came in to the office, looked at the policy for 5 minutes and left, and that was the end of it. There's another story though, which doesn't have as happy of an ending, and this is what gets to FDA. So we said to FDA, then we wrote to FDA, we had a product, another product, an antibiotic that we made that is extremely stable, meaning it doesn't break down with heat. We had approval to, maybe a 2 or 3 year shelf life on it, but in fact, we tested 5 years out. It was still perfectly good, rock stable, solid. We had a great manufacturing process. Said to FDA, normally you would make us to scale. If we said to FDA, if we can scale, if we can use the same equipment but bigger sized for that product, then we'll be able to free up, I forget the number, I think it's about 100 or 200 million tablets of production for doxycycline, so we can get more of this product out to HHS, of which FDA was an agency, as well as this Metropolitan Rapid Deployment Force. We get much more out. And we said we will, so normally you have to make a batch in the bigger equipment, you have to put it on 3 months of accelerated stability, which is higher temperatures, higher humidity than usual, then test it. And then send it to FDA, ask if you can scale up the equipment, you'll do tests, all kinds of other tests on it, and then 6 months or a year, they'll likely give you approval. So I said, it's a rock solid product, let us scale it up into other equipment, and then we'll be able to make much more doxycycline for HHS. And FDA said no. Why? Because they live and die by the regulations. The guy at FDA, or the guys at FDA, I said guys, I say that generically, it could be men or women, who make that decision. If they go by the regulations, they won't lose their jobs. If they go contrary to the regulations and something goes wrong, they can lose their jobs. They didn't care about the science, they cared about protecting their jobs. And I'm here to tell you that is how the majority of government works. So when President Trump says that FDA has fast-tracked studies on hydroxychloroquine, don't hold your breath. That's not the way FDA works. FDA people know that if they don't do complete studies and get all the proper data in and go look at how the testing methods to test, in different tests for whether people are infected or not infected, whether they were validated or not validated, what was the certification on the equipment that was used, how was the certification actually certified, who checked the certifiers, and on and on and on. FDA, their inclination is, if they don't get all that information, then they don't want to lose their jobs by approving something, and approving something that could be false. So don't count on FDA to come through anytime soon with the hydroxychloroquine study. Now that's the bad news. Here's the good news. We don't need FDA approval. If this was a new drug to the market, that would need FDA approval before the company could ever send it out. But this drug is already approved for rheumatoid arthritis, and it's used for lupus also. It's all over the place. It's already out there. What this study would do is it would allow FDA to then officially approve the drug to also be used for coronavirus. But that isn't needed. It never has been. Approximately half of the usage of drugs in the practice of medicine is for diseases that the drugs are not FDA approved for. This is completely legal. This is completely regular. And this is what's known as the practice of medicine. This is the history. This is a historical, the historical art of practicing medicine. So as more and more studies that are done informally come in. By the way, I don't know what they're going to show. They may show that hydroxychloroquine works for treating COVID-19, coronavirus. They might show it doesn't work. They might show people are dropping dead of QT prolongation heart attacks. I don't know what the study is going to show. But the studies are going to start rolling in from all over the place. All kinds of hospitals, big ones, small ones, doctors writing in their experience to the journals. And there will be a weight of evidence. Now, this is not perfect evidence. All things being ideal, we would wait until a full, proper study can be done and all the systems can be validated. And when that happens, a year from now, there are going to be a lot of people who are dead who could have been saved if this drug worked. So you need to know that this FDA fast-tracking it, as President Trump said, that's all nice and good. It's unnecessary. I don't think anybody's going to wait for it, but we are waiting for good data. So now I'm going to talk about some of the data. One of the Orthodox Jewish doctors from a Harvard hospital. I also was there I was 1 year at a Harvard hospital. This guy is way beyond me in his medical training. But he said that we need to wait for a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical study. Okay, blah, blah, blah. That is standard medical science. But the fact is, people are dying now. We need to have some idea or indication of whether the drug really works or not. And the idea of waiting for FDA, that's a standard medical doctor, physician who doesn't know how things really work. That's their position. But the fact is, as data comes in, positive or negative, I don't know which, helping or maybe hurting patients, I don't know the answer. Physicians, if the data is good, if the safety looks good, even though it's not fully proven, but they have patients who are deathly ill, you have a high rate of, an unacceptably high rate of patients that are not surviving this. There are medical doctors that will start to use the drug, and they'll start to use it, pretty widely. So we don't have to wait for FDA to get the answer. We can work with interim answers. Now, again, I don't make the medical decisions for you. Your licensed medical doctor makes decisions for you, but that's just what you need to know. So this doctor from Harvard seems like a very bright and respectable and reliable guy. He just doesn't know about how the FDA works and the approval process. Now, there's a different medical doctor, Orthodox Jew, from Muncie, who is saying things that I'm really quite shocked to hear. First of all, in one of his videos, he called zinc a vitamin. It's not a vitamin, it's a mineral. Now, you may say it's a small error. It's a small error for the public. A medical doctor should know that difference. He also put out a letter thanking President Trump for approving hydroxychloroquine for coronavirus. That's what he wrote. He's wrong. President Trump doesn't approve drugs. The FDA approves drugs. What Dr. Fauci explained publicly is that Dr. Fauci is a hard science expert in virology. And he's the leader on this. He explained that President Trump is trying to be a cheerleader. And that's good. You want the president to give hope to people. You want him to rally people. But you don't take President Trump's scientific analysis or regulatory analysis explicitly. You have to listen to the scientific experts. So for that doctor from Muncie, I would encourage people to be very careful about listening to what he says. He's wrong. Zinc is not a vitamin, it's a mineral. He's wrong. President Trump did not approve hydroxychloroquine for a coronavirus. The FDA did not approve hydroxychloroquine for coronavirus. And you be very careful. This guy also put out a regimen of zinc, azithromycin, and hydroxychloroquine to treat coronavirus. He has no mention of the fact that azithromycin that's in his regimen can interfere with the liver's ability to metabolize or break down hydroxychloroquine, potentially causing dangerously high levels of hydroxychloroquine and therefore potentially causing heart attacks. So be very careful about that Muncie doctor. Now back to the Harvard doctor. Very good, legitimate guy. He said the only evidence that we have for hydroxychloroquine is a study from France that, by the way, used it with azithromycin, and he pointed out major errors in that study, major reasons why we should be very cautious about the information in that study. He's correct about that, but he's not correct that that's the only place that we've been getting information from. There is an excellent YouTube site called Medcram, MEDCRAM, and if you look at the coronavirus update number 34, he goes through data of hydroxychloroquine used to treat coronavirus from China and from South Korea. And so there's additional information. Now, I don't know how well we can trust the studies from China, but we have additional information there. Some of it looks pretty decent. I would not depend on it, but I can tell you now, there are all kinds of informal studies and formal studies going on all around the country. Now, I want to talk to you about about the nature of some of those studies. Something else you may not know. I mentioned previously about the art of medicine, the practice of medicine. We're not computers, medical doctors. You're allowed to use any drug for any reason if you have a rational scientific reason to think that it might work, and you as a medical doctor, you assess that the benefits outweigh the risks. Now, if you really mess up on that, the lawyers will probably destroy you. But that's the ability. There's another aspect to the art of medicine, and that is medical doctors taking unknown drugs themselves. Sigmund Freud was the originator of modern psychiatry, and he was the founding father of psychoanalysis, which is really the basis for most of psychologists, psychologists that we have today. He was wrong about some things, he was right about many, but he was a pioneer. Do you know that he was the one to introduce cocaine into medical practice? And how did he introduce it? He used it himself. It was a new drug, people didn't know about it, and he tried it himself. I'm not telling you to go take cocaine, heaven forbid. What I'm trying to tell you is that there's a long history of medical doctors using themselves as guinea pigs to try new drugs that are not proven yet. Just like there's a long history of medical doctors putting themselves in harm's way to treat sick people. And many times medical doctors die, they sacrifice themselves treating patients. For those, there's really no more noble cause. They're like American soldiers putting themselves in harm's way. And there have been doctors now that have died from coronavirus. So you should know that when you do clinical studies, patients have to sign all kinds of forms that they understand their risks and blah, blah, blah. Well, medical doctors, and I would think nurses also, because nurses know quite a bit of medicine, and they're also very, very dedicated. I'm talking about general, I can't talk about everybody. Generally, very dedicated to their patients and also put themselves in harm's way. There are studies going on by medical doctors and nurses who are being exposed to coronavirus, where some of them are taking hydroxychloroquine and some are taking a sugar pill, and they don't know which. And they're putting themselves on the line. So a lot of this data is going to start coming in. And when it does, we're going to be able to get a lot more information so that medical doctors can start to make much more informed decisions about whether or not they want to take a chance when using hydroxychloroquine, or if they want to take the risk of not using it. Because if it does work for coronavirus and patients don't get it and they succumb or they're permanently damaged, that's also bad. That's the art of medicine. That's the practice of medicine. And it's not being done by some artists. It's being done by people who have extensive scientific training, and they have a world of communication of that scientific information through scientific journals. So that's what's coming. You do not have to wait for FDA to come up with the answer. Now, some other things. When people talk about a vaccine, vaccines are not drugs. The drug is a drug is a drug you want to go in to the body and kill a bacteria or kill a virus. A vaccine is an injection that will hopefully cause your immune system to start to make, I don't want to get too complicated, make antibodies, start to attack that virus. And to get a vaccine approved, which is not on the market yet, not like hydroxychloroquine that's already on the market, or not like some other antiviral drugs that are already on the market for other uses that are now being tested. But a new vaccine is not on the market yet. That will require FDA approval before you can even get your hands on it, or before doctors can get their hands on it. And that's going to require extensive testing. And you might say, oh, well, people are dying, just to prove it. What could be worse? A lot. They could cause immunologic reactions that cause people to die. They could cause agglomerations that settle into basement membranes of the glomerulus and cause the kidneys to fail. There's a lot that could go wrong. There is no way a vaccine is going to be approved by the FDA before it's fully and extensively tested in all the traditional ways. So don't count on any vaccine being approved at least until a year from now, and maybe much longer. By that time, this catastrophe will have hit and be gone. So when you hear, great news vaccine, give it a break. Go tell FDA about it. Also, the companies say, we're screening drugs, we're screening 1,000 chemicals. Well, if these are chemicals that are not already on the market, approved by FDA, it will be at least a year, if not years, until FDA approves them, because they will have to go through full testing, because there are real, true risks to them. And until you know what those risks are, the FDA is simply not going to take those risks. All right, I think I've spoken long enough. I'm sorry if this was boring to you, but this is a real catastrophe we're dealing with, and I wanted to make sure that people have the full information. Thank you, and if you liked it, it was helpful. I want you to know I'm not commercializing this. I don't want anybody's money, but if you can send it to other people who might also find it helpful or useful, please do so. I'm in this just to help others, and I hope that you will too. Thank you.